and respectful of anything that moved. She smiled. She could see the wind stir the treetops, for the surface of the hills seemed to ripple beneath the blue sky. The breeze, when it slid through her window, smelled of leaves. It might very well have been Galana who told her the story, come to that. It would be like her. And Galana had always hated her. Still did, for all that she was grown now, and married besides to Perlith, who was a second Sola of Daymar. The only higher ranks were First Sola and King. But Galana had hoped to marry Tor, who was First Sola and would someday be King. It was no matter that Tor would not have had Galana if she had been the only royal maiden available. "I'd run off into the hills and be a bandit first," a much younger Tor had told his very young cousin, who had gone off in fits of giggles at the idea of Tor wearing rags and a blue headband and dancing for luck under each quarter of the moon. Tor, who at the time had been stiff with terror at Galana's very determined attempts to ensnare him, had relaxed enough to grin and tell her she had no proper respect and was a shameless hoyden. "Yes," she said unrepentantly. Tor, for whatever reasons, was rather over-formal with everyone but her. But being First Sola to a solemn, twice-widowed king of a land with a shadow over it might have had that effect on a far more frivolous young man than Tor. She suspected that he was as grateful for her existence as she was for his. One of her earliest memories was riding in a baby sack over Tor's shoulders while he galloped his horse over a series of hurdles. She had screamed with delight and wound her tiny hands in his thick black hair. Tika, later, had been furious, but Tor, who usually took any accusation of the slightest dereliction of duty with white lips and a set face, had only laughed. But whenever she decided that it must have been Galana who first told her the story, she found she couldn't believe it of her after all. Having told it for spite and malice, yes, but the story itself had too much sad grandeur. But perhaps she only felt that way because it was about her mother. Perhaps she had changed it in her own mind, made a tragedy of nothing but sour gossip. But that Galana would deliberately spend enough time in her company to tell her the story was out of character. Galana preferred, whenever possible, to look vaguely over the head of the least of her cousins, with an expression on her face indicating that there was a dead fly on the window-sill, and why hadn't the half-orc swept it away? When Galana was startled into speaking to her at all, it was usually from a motive of immediate vengeance. The tale of Arlbeth's second wife would be too roundabout for her purposes. Still, that it had been one of the cousins was the best guess. Not Tor, of course. One of the others. She leaned out of the window and looked down. It was hard to recognize people from the tops of their heads several stories up. Except Tor. She always knew him, even if all she had to go on was an elbow extending an inch or two beyond a door frame. This below her now was probably Perlith. That self-satisfied walk was distinctive even from above, and the way 3 of the half-orc, dressed in fine livery, trailed behind him for no purpose but to lend to their master's importance by their presence pretty well assured it. Tor went about alone when he could. He told her, grimly, that he had enough of company during the course of his duties as First Sola, and the last thing he wanted was an unofficial entourage for any gaps in the official ones. And she'd like to see her father pulling velvet-covered flunkies in his wake like a child with a toy on a string. Perlith's head spoke to another dark